Sensational! Somehow Canadian Premier League players, Jimmy Brennan, just keep doing this. Into the area, onside as he is onside, and the champions lead in Langley by 2-1. Matteo Schiavone has taken Forge FC back to the top of the CPL standings.
Welcome back, everybody, to the CPL Newsroom, presented by Volkswagen. Charlie O'Connor-Clarke with Mitchell Tierney. It's August 19th, and we've just got through match week 19 in the 2024 season. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, Mitch. 4 great games, no draws this week, and I think we're going to have to talk about why there's no draws, because if we look at the standings later, we'll understand how important 3 points are for every team. We'll run through the scores from the weekend very quickly before we jump into it. Friday night at York Lions Stadium, Cavalry 2, York United 1, as they kind of maybe stopped some home momentum that York had, followed by Atletico Ottawa getting back on the horse, beating Pacific 3-0 at Starlight Stadium. Valour winning 2-1 at home over Halifax Wanderers to get their playoff push a bit of a boost. And then finally, Sunday's only game was Vancouver FC 1, Forge FC 2, thanks to a very late winner from Matteo Schiavone. But we're going back to the start of the weekend to start us off, Mitch, at York Lions Stadium. Cavalry 2, York 1. This was an interesting game, a very interesting game. It was not very dry. The ball was kind of zipping around out there. You saw, a couple of touches looking a little bit soft at times just because the ball was so wet. But it was a lot of fun. Obviously, Maël Henry back in the lineup after a lot of injuries to begin the season, and you saw how good he can be. This is probably, for me, his best game in a Cavalry shirt. He scores that outrageous finish early. Not great defending, I think, to give him that amount of space and that lane to run through. But then York equalized very quickly with, again, not great defending when everybody collapsing on Juan Cordova to give Elijah Adekubi that space. And that's a goal that Marco Carducci is probably going to want back. Just flies over his hand with the cross. But didn't matter for Cavalry in the end, because it would be Fraser Aird capping off a really, really fun counter-attacking move between him and Ali Musi and Lowell Wright, kind of haunting his old team a little bit. And Cavalry, all of a sudden, on that night, moved up to, I believe it was 3rd place at the time and 1 point off the top. They're back and forth after the weekend, but still 4 points out of 1st place. Mitch, Cavalry, I think that's 4 wins in a row. They're the hottest team in the league right now, right?
Yeah, and once again, I think it's the depth of this team that's becoming so important now that they have players returning from injury. You mentioned Maël Henry's injuries this season, and the player who plays in his position, or at least in this game, a lot of the time, Sergio Camargo has kind of been in and out of the lineup as well with injury. So having a guy like Maël Henry who can come in and fill in that position and give Camargo the opportunity to have breaks every once in a while, but also just be a game changer when he's in that position. Like, this is a young guy who's so direct and confident in what he does. Like, you obviously don't score a goal like he did if you don't have confidence to back yourself, but we see that in the way he dribbles at defenders and the way he just goes forward, and injecting another player like that into the lineup so important for Cavalry. And then they're able to bring someone like Lowell Wright off the bench. I believe it was at halftime. He's a completely different look at striker, holds up the ball well, plays a role in their goal. And I think a good sign that, Cavalry maybe not at their best in this game, but they're able to get a win. And that's something that obviously was the case last year when they were rolling to the CPL Shield title. But this year, it seems like they've had to have their absolute lights out performance if they're going to win any game. And now, again, when you have different ways of beating teams like they do now, you're going to win some of these ones that maybe you wouldn't have earlier in the season. So that's a definite positive for Cavalry. And, their position in the table, they stay in the same spot, which seems funny, but their momentum right now is obviously significant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I did the math on Friday night, so it's a little outdated now. But at that point, it had been just over 20 days since Cavalry were outside the playoffs, and after that game, they were within 1 point of first place. So that's how rapidly things can change in this league when things start going your way a little bit, and you look a little bit more like the team you want to be. And as you mentioned, finding ways to win. The depth has been so important to them. Ali Musi again coming back into this game, and he plays a role in the second goal. He's been outstanding. Bradley Camden coming back from injury has actually been maybe quietly very helpful. All 4 games of this winning streak have been, the 4 games that Camden has played since he came back from injury. So, maybe he's the good luck charm. But
we don't give credit to defenders on this show. What is this?
We'll make an exception for Brad because I like him. But yeah, this is a Cavalry team that is finding the ways to win that maybe it wasn't earlier in the season. They find that second goal. They take the lead, and that's not necessarily new. They concede, but what is the difference? That they kind of found an extra gear in the second half. The first half was quite even. Maybe York were actually arguably the slightly better side, had the better chances in the first half, but Cavalry found a second gear in the second half. They were the better team there. They found a way to kind of just exploit those spaces on the counterattack, and eventually it did work. But let's talk about York again quickly. Obviously, last weekend they were flying high, moving into first place. Not quite there anymore. They're back in third, but still obviously very, very close to everybody else in that race. The first half, again, it was good. It was good. And they found the equalizers they needed. They got themselves back in, but they couldn't really, they ran into trouble in the second half. I know they made some changes. Around the 70-minute mark, Benjamin Mora moved to a back 4, trying to get, Max Ferrari and Orlando Boteo to overlap a little bit more as fullbacks, and he tried to do some different things to Cavalry. And I think it worked a little bit. They got into those spaces a little bit more. But Mitchell, is there much to be concerned that maybe this just wasn't their game, and obviously that outrageous run of momentum had to falter at some point?
Yeah, I think it's more that I think, like you said, they got to some good positions, but maybe just not as decisive, and the decision making at points to maybe take a long shot when you could have slipped in a player, or to go alone when maybe you could have slowed the momentum and brought in someone else. Like, I think there was just little things like that end up costing them. But at the end of the day, I mean, one of the biggest things under this Benjamin Mora team is anytime they've dropped points, they've followed it up with a victory. And obviously only one of those drop points has been all 3 so far before this Cavalry game. So what this really does is it makes the game this coming weekend even bigger.
Does it ever?
I think this is arguably one of the biggest, at least regular season games in York United history, and probably one of their biggest games against the Forge FC team that I think, if they go out and beat, that will go a long way towards, I think, signaling to themselves and to the rest of the leagues, like, they are true title contenders beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like, this is the one team that's always overcome them, including this season, 3 times already in all competitions. So yeah, I think, again, from a results perspective, it's probably more disappointing than a performance perspective, but you can't call yourself title contenders and go out and lose twice in a row to other teams kind of in that title conversation. Absolutely. So that's what will be on their mind, heading into this next game.
Yeah, that's a good tease. Friday night is definitely the most substantial 9-5 derby since they met in the playoffs 3 years ago. I want to say that was 2021, I think.
That's right.
Yes, and it was a one-off at Tim Hortons Field. But yeah, York definitely looking for something different against Forge than they had the other times they played this year. Very quickly to wrap us up on York here, let's go back, because I know Benjamin Mora offered us some wisdom about not getting too high or too low, and where he kind of sits after that performance. So let's go back to York Lions Stadium one more time and wrap us up by hearing from the York United head coach.
No, but there is a lot of positives, of course. I mean, we played a very good first half. We had the ball most of the time versus a very good team. We were brave to go forward. We scored a very good goal. So yeah, we had good positioning in the first half. The second half was different. So there's a lot of positives, and the only thing I can say is that, like I said before, we were not the best team last week, and we're not the worst team now. I mean, we're just in the competition, and we're trying to win every game. And today was not our night.
So that's a home manager who was not particularly upset after his team's loss. Let's move on to one who was. Sorry, James Merriman, but we are going to Starlight Stadium next, where Atletico Ottawa scored 3 times in the first 22 minutes, and that was all they needed to do to beat Pacific 3-0 on the road. I believe all 3 were set pieces, and that's kind of the main number one story for this game. Mitch, I think we'll start with Pacific here. Because it was a very, very frustrating game for them, very upsetting game for them. And I believe they've won 1 of their last 9 games now, slipping all the way to 7th place. We heard from James Merriman last week and how concerned he was. We're about to hear how concerned he continues to be after this game. Mitch, how concerned are you?
Very.
Yeah.
When you make so many changes, you bring in a player like Moses Dyer. I think it was 7 changes to the lineup. There's almost a new hope, or at least these were kind of the changes we were hoping to see to try and shift the momentum of this team. And then you concede in just the second minute. Like, this team hasn't gained a single point from losing positions yet this year, so there's no reference point there to maybe fight back into this game and get a draw. Or obviously 3 points would be ideal right now, but I think they would have taken a single point after the way that match started. And yeah, I mean, just everything, nothing's working right now for this team. And we know this is a group based on playoffs last year, Canadian Championship run this year. Like, if they get to the dance, they bring their shoes, but they're still only 3 points out of the postseason with a game in hand, but they drop into 7th for, I think, the first time since fall of 2019.
Wow.
Which, keep in mind, there was only 7 teams in the league at that point. So this is kind of uncharted territory, I think, a little bit for the Islanders right now, and not in a good way.
No, certainly not. I think at certain parts of that game they would have taken just a goal.
Yeah, that's fair.
The fact they were down 3-0, all from set pieces in the first 20 minutes. It just wasn't good enough. I think they'll be incredibly frustrated. And I mean, even if you're an attacker, like, you are kind of starting from a hole after those 3 goals, especially conceding just less than 2 minutes in from Sissoko. But yeah, just I think, surprisingly, maybe in this one, the problems not necessarily the same problems that have always been the same. Because yes, they didn't score in this game, but they generally have been all right defensively most of this year. That was not the case,
especially
on Saturday.
Set pieces too.
Exactly, absolutely not the case on Saturday. Naturally frustrating. So let's go and hear what exactly James Merriman had to say after another very, very disappointing night for Pacific FC.
Yeah, we're disappointed, of course. The first goal coming so early hurt us, obviously, the way we want to start a game. But it's no excuse to give up the second and third so quickly after, and all on set pieces, which is really disappointing. Set pieces, we've been very good this season. We've been very organized. We've been there, and we haven't given up much. So the first one, we need to respond in a better way to wake up, and the second and the third is a lack of intensity and mentality and aggressiveness. So it's disappointing because it puts us completely on the back foot. The second half, I think, unfortunately, we have to make changes to bring the right mentality, to bring the right approach to the second half, and I think you see this, but it took us too long to get going once again, and it's unacceptable here at home in front of our fans, who are absolutely incredible tonight. The fans have been there, and the fans are clapping us off the pitch when we go into halftime. So the fans are there, and we have a responsibility to show and to give them more. We do, and it's really disappointing match, considering the work that these guys are putting in every day. It's frustrating.
And I just double checked it. It's 1 win in their last 9 in all competitions for Pacific. But I think only 3 points out of a playoff spot still, despite being in 7th. So
game in hand too. So, again, that's the funny thing about this league is you can have a very, very frustrating month or even couple of months and then find yourself in the place you want to be anyway if you go on a run. On to Ottawa, though. Atletico Ottawa, this is the second time they've won
on Vancouver Island this year. They beat Pacific 1-0 in a league game earlier this season. Had been on a bit of a rough stretch. They'd lost 3 in a row coming into this one, lost their spot at the top of the table. But they come into this one, they make very good use of all of the opportunities from set pieces. Mitch, I don't know how much we want to weigh the balance between this being a game where Pacific did very poorly on those set pieces and how much Ottawa took advantage of them and went out and won this game. But I think at the very least, Ottawa quite happy to have a very emphatic and convincing win to get them back on the horse, right?
Yeah, I don't think Ottawa will much care where we stand on that debate at all. I mean, this is just what the doctor ordered, 3 first half goals. They're absolutely in control after that. They're able to get a player like Iliadis into the team who clearly can play multiple positions here, plays as a left-sided player in a back 3 in this game and scores an Olympico, which is like a rite of passage in the Canadian Premier League at this point. So, clearly good for the league and good for Atletico Ottawa to have him back. And I think briefly back into the top spot. I know they aren't there right now after we'll talk about what Forge were able to do during this week, but I think that's significant for them in terms of, announcing, hey guys, we're still here. We're still very much part of this title race. I know we, blew our lead over the past few weeks, but we're still up there with all the rest of these teams. So I think a solid performance from them. Obviously not a perfect day, but still one where they'll be very happy with the result.
Yeah, I think this is a game where the result probably means more to them than the performance. Seeing the changes they made, no Ollie Bassett in the starting lineup, no Alberto Zapater, no Balou Tabla, even Luke Singh is on the bench for this one, but difference makers made a difference. Ilias Iliadis. Again, I think doing things that I don't think I knew he was able to do. Certainly not that he could play in that role, and obviously hitting the set pieces like that. Very quickly on this game, the expected goals for a 3-0 Ottawa win, 1.25 for Pacific and 0.4 for Atletico Ottawa, which maybe says something about the expected goal value of an Olympico.
Yeah, it can't be high.
No, absolutely. But anyway, Atletico Ottawa, I think all they needed was that game to stop the bleeding. They had been kind of spiraling a little bit. They looked quite bad against Forge in particular. And against York a couple of weeks ago, obviously on the road. So I think very, very big for them to be able to get back into it, because they now go to Halifax and play a presumably very, very upset Halifax Wanderers team. That's next weekend. And that's actually the game we're going to go to next, because Halifax and Valour came into this game at the bottom of the table. Halifax had played midweek to make up a game in hand. They lost to Forge in reasonably frustrating circumstances, going down to 10 men within the first half, and then 2 goals that were perhaps controversial. But anyway, they come into this game on Valour. Dan Nimick had spoken quite bullishly about it. Said that they needed a response, said that he 100% believed that Halifax were going to make the playoffs. Started well for them. Massimo Ferrin scores in the 22nd minute, but after that, not quite. Mitch, let's start with Halifax. What went wrong for them in this game?
Yeah, I think just obviously a really disappointing week for them as an overall, where they have some chance to catch up on the rest of the league and end up collecting 0 points as their road struggles continue. But like you said, they open the scoring and everything's going pretty well for them. I mean, they are finally getting Sean Rea into those dangerous pockets of space, and that's something that the goal comes off of. And then just a moment where they break down defensively and Dan Nimick is kind of forced to head the ball into his own net. Jordy Swivel's right there behind him, ready to finish it off if he doesn't get there. And then they go into the second half and give a ball away in their own half. And, Swivel's there again, who's probably the worst Valour player to give the ball away to.
Yeah.
And it's in the back of their net, or I guess marginally over their line.
I don't know about the back of the net. It's kind of the middle of the net. But.
Yeah, at best, within a few seconds. But, Jordan Feliciano, who's coaching them in this game with Patrice Geyser suspended, said, if they want to play the way that they do, where they have all this possession and they're the protagonists in the game, like they can't make those individual errors to let other teams back in. And when the margin of error is already that small for a team like Halifax, who are fighting to get themselves back into the position they want to be, something like an equalizing goal just before halftime gets even bigger for this team and is even tougher on their confidence. And that's just kind of what they're dealing with right now, especially away from home. So just a really tough week for them, and they'll have to head home to the East Coast and really show a response again under significant pressure at the Wanderers grounds over the next, I think it's 2 matches at home.
Yeah, significant pressure. They've played 10 away games this year and they have 4 points. They have 1 win, they have 1 draw, and everything else has been 0. That is a problem. It's a huge problem. They weren't great on the road last year either. But this year it has been a huge, huge problem, and largely the main reason that they are at the bottom of the table right now. But thankfully for them, back home, maybe a tricky one against Atletico Ottawa, though, who obviously always play them pretty tough. Anyway, let's talk about Valour, because they deserve a lot of credit in this game too. I think maybe at times we have not given Valour the credit they've deserved, but they've won 3 of their last 4 games. Obviously, Jordy Swivel continues to be a very good difference maker for them up front. I know that there were a few strong individual performances for this Valour team, but Mitch, what is impressing you about them at the moment?
Well, I think in this match in particular, like, they were incredibly clinical. I think they had 9 touches in the box, and 5 of them were shots. And then obviously 2 of them were goals, and one of them obviously wasn't even their touch.
I don't know if the first goal was a touch in the box.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was it was a great cross from a wide area from Temi Antonoglu that again kind of forced what happened. But I think what's impressed me for Valour over the last little bit, and what really is their clear advantage right now in pushing for that playoff spot, is more than any of these other teams kind of in the bottom 4 in the Canadian Premier League right now. They have a system and an identity in 11 that's clearly working.
Yes.
It's finding success. They're getting the best out of the players in it. And obviously that maybe isn't the case for the other 3 teams, and a lot to like right now. But one of the things that I keyed on in this match was that midfield combo that's kind of developing between Safon Mala and Dante Campbell. A really good combo of Mala's technical ability and Dante Campbell's ability to get in the face of every player who's on the ball for the other team and just be, constantly, pressing and have that high energy. But also, when I asked Phil DeSantos about this after the game, he mentioned, we still have Raf Ohin off the bench. We still have Noah Verhoeven off the bench. Juan Pablo Sanchez, like, they have these experienced players, and central midfield's been an issue for Valour kind of over the years.
Over like the club's entire history.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they just seem to have a depth and quality there that they haven't had in the past. And obviously, central midfield, pretty important to winning in any league. So
yes.
And now they have a chance to, I believe, get above the playoff line for the first time this season when they face Vancouver at home. That's a pretty significant match for them, but one that, considering how they've been doing lately and how they've developed in the system, you really back them in right now.
Yeah, that will be a good game, and I think it would be, maybe a surprise to some, especially from a couple of months ago, but to see Valour with a genuine chance of getting back to that playoff spot is very impressive, and they have been very good in recent weeks against some good teams. They beat Forge, they beat Pacific. Maybe not what we're calling a very good team right now, but still a team that's been difficult to play against for Valour, and obviously Halifax here, playing with a lot of desperation, and still, Valour getting the upper hand. Let's hear the last word on them, though, from their head coach, Phil DeSantos, who always is a joy to talk to, but especially, I think, after a really, really important win for his club. So let's hear what Phil had to say.
The guys are together. The guys are a fantastic group. I can't say enough about how they came together after going through so much adversity in the early stages of the season, and very new as a group. So they've grown together a lot, and I just I'm just seeing how all of it is coming together. And for me, my joy is because I see how much they want this, and I really want this team to succeed for for this group of players.
I mean, the words are very joyful, but I do think that it is sometimes tough to distinguish whether Valour won or lost from Phil's tone of voice. But anyway, moving on to our final game of the weekend. That was Vancouver FC hosting Forge. And if it was a nightmare week for the Halifax Wanderers, it was a perfect week for Forge FC, who obviously won last weekend against Atletico Ottawa, beat Halifax midweek at home, come here to Vancouver. I think would have probably been okay with just the draw, especially after Vancouver equalized in the second half. And maybe Vancouver were having actually some of the better chances in the second half. But Matteo Schiavone, who had not played very often for this club, didn't have a start for Forge, comes off the bench though in this one. And he is the one that brings down an incredible ball over the top, manages to stay onside. Maybe not the greatest marking to ensure that he's onside there, but it's a very, very good finish from a young player. I know that I'm speaking well ahead of the highlight reel here, but if you're listening to this in podcast form, you don't care about that anyway. And I think everybody watching this show knows what happened regardless. So Mitchell, Forge FC, first place by 2 points. They have made up their game in hand. So this is all real. This is the way things are. But this has been a dream week for them, right?
Yeah, historic for a Forge FC team to be top of the table.
Yeah, no way. That's so crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what an impressive week for them. I think coming into this week, or at least, before Wednesday's game, like they hadn't won back-to-back games since the start of the season. So
yeah,
just to be able to find this level of consistency when that's kind of been what's been their issue this year is they've had a ton of really, really good top end performances and then haven't been able to follow them up. So to, go out and do that this week was really impressive. And now they've scored multiple goals in 10 of their last 12 games in all competitions, and they've scored in all 12. So offensively, this team's doing special things, and they're doing so without their main goal scorer over the past 2 games. As Kwesi Poku is off the pitch with transfer interest going on right now. Heli Jabrapor gets his first of the season against Halifax. Jordan Hamilton comes in, gets a goal and an assist. And then, Matteo Schiavone, who I think, Charlie, you and I were both there against Halifax, and we saw him sub in late and just, he looked like a player who was kind of shot out of a cannon. Like he was going everywhere and creating a lot of chances. And that's what you get when you substitute a player like that who's so hungry late in a game is, maybe other players aren't making that run through the middle to get on the end of a ball like that, but he's able to do it and obviously score a fantastic first professional goal for himself. And Bobby Smirniotis always says it, like there's 23 players on a team and you need all 23 to have special moments over a season, especially if you're going to win a regular season. So they get that from Schiavone, and surprisingly this is their first win outside of Ontario this season, which is in the crazy. CPL at least, which is kind of crazy, but obviously
crazy. Kind
of points to what this Forge team needs to do over the last little bit in order to stay in that top spot, is to find more consistency away from home. But you certainly like what you've been seeing from them this week.
Yeah, I think so. Schiavone, for the record, before Wednesday night, he'd played 6 minutes all year. I think he has played, I think he's probably at least tripled that total. I think he played about 10-ish minutes on Wednesday, 5 against Vancouver, but 5 very impactful ones because he scores that goal.
Now's a great time to cherry pick his goals per 90 statistic.
Exactly. It's off the charts. And also, as you mentioned, another huge positive for Forge is Jordan Hamilton getting on the board with a goal on Wednesday and an assist in Vancouver, because as you mentioned, Kwesi Poku not in the lineup for these 2 games because there's plenty of transfer interest around him. We will see if something gets done and if he is moving on. But if so, Forge will have a hole to fill up front because he's been so impactful there. So that might be Jordan Hamilton. It might be Terry Campbell. Either way, it might be Matteo Schiavone. It might be Matteo Schiavone. Either way, it is, to be fair, the kind of back to the original plan to begin the season for Forge. Kwesi Poku obviously kind of came into that position after a couple of months. So, the start of the year, we all thought Jordan Hamilton and Terry Campbell would be the striker combo. seems like it might finish that way anyway, with just a brief interlude of Kwesi Poku randomly being the hottest goal scorer in the Canadian Premier League for a couple of months. Anyway, that's Forge there in first place. They have that huge match against York United on Friday. That will be a lot of fun at York Lions Stadium. Let's talk about Vancouver FC here, though. Showed a lot of fight in this game. They always seem to show a lot of fight against Forge. Actually, they do quite well against them. They claw their way back into it and equalize in the second half. But Mitchell, I think maybe just that one moment where they kind of switch off, and that's where Forge can kill them, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they would have been pretty happy with a point. Like, I think that's a momentum builder coming off a victory over Pacific, and especially with the way they do it, Elijah Ba coming off the bench and getting a really nice goal, and then they're on the front foot after that. They're really pushing for, again, a draw would have been good, a win would have been incredible for this team right now against Forge. But yeah, they just kind of switch off in a key moment of the game where they're able to pretty easily thwart a counterattack, and then you've got three guys in the middle, who and none of them track a run from a player coming straight through them. I mean, again, that's just the kind of thing that you have to be switched on to for an entire 90 minutes, especially against a team like Forge, who, if you switch off for any second like that against them, they're usually going to take advantage of that. So four losses, I think, and just one win in their last six at home, which Pacific being the only team they've beaten at home since April 18th, which is not certainly ideal for a team looking to stay above the playoff line. It just seems like they're not necessarily learning the lessons right now from the recent losses, and they're kind of running out of time to figure that out, because the gap between them and those top four is really widening, and it's starting to get pretty narrow between them and the teams kind of behind them, hoping really to grab their playoff position.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, one of those teams is their opponent next weekend. That's Valour. That'll be a huge game for both those teams. But Vancouver, interesting to see how they evolve. Interesting to see if they're able to involve Ayman Salouf a little bit more. Obviously, since we've last spoken on this podcast, there was that massive loan swap. Moses Dyer going to Pacific and Salouf going to Vancouver. Both players getting off the bench this weekend for debuts. We'll see if they can maybe get a little bit more accustomed and make bigger impacts. But those are our 4 games for the weekend. Just to wrap us up here, let's take one last look at the CPL standings as they are after match week 19. As we've mentioned, Forge FC are first place with 34 points, followed closely by Atletico Ottawa on 32, York United on 31, and Cavalry on 30. That is a very tight top 4 in the title race. All those teams on 19 games, so they all have 9 left. That's right. And then we've got a pretty tight as well 4-team race for that last playoff spot. Vancouver FC in 5th with 23, Valour with 20, also on 20 is Pacific FC just behind Valour on the tiebreaker. Halifax Wanderers have 16 points there at the bottom of the table. Halifax and Pacific obviously both have a game in hand as well, so plenty of ground they can make up in that race. Starting next weekend, let's look at the schedule for that. We've mentioned all these games already. They are going to be very exciting. York United and Forge is a great way to kick off the weekend. Kind of a title clash, as we've mentioned already, 8 o'clock Eastern on Friday night at York Lions Stadium. Saturday's doubleheader starts with Halifax hosting Atletico Ottawa, followed by Cavalry hosting Pacific, both those games on Saturday. And then Sunday afternoon's game, Valour FC hosting Vancouver FC in the Tony Bet match of the week, with that 5th playoff spot on the line. Watch all 4 games live on OneSoccer, or even better, if you're in the area for any of them, make sure you grab a ticket and go check it out. We will be all over these games at campl.ca and at CPL Soccer on social media. And we will be back again next Monday to break them all down and see where the new title race is at that point. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Mitchell, for putting up with me for half an hour plus, I believe. And again, thank you to Volkswagen for sponsoring the show. So we hope you have a great week. We hope you have a very enjoyable weekend watching the CPL, and we will see you again next time.
Exceptional. Somehow Canadian Premier League players, Jimmy Brennan, just keep doing this.
Into the area, onside as he is onside, and the champions lead in Langley by 2-1. Chaos Schiavone has taken Forge FC back to the top of the CPL standings